Good evening. Welcome. Thank you for coming this evening. My name is Tom Power. I'm the co-founder of Pura Aventura, and we're hosting this evening. So delighted that you're here. Delighted to welcome the great and the good, very proud to have some important people in conservation in the audience, so thank you for coming, and thank you to His Excellency David Gallagher, the Chilean ambassador, for also being here but supporting the event so fulsomely, so thank you, sir. I'm going to talk just a little bit short, don't worry, about what tonight's about for us and why we're doing it, and then I'll pass you on to the main event, which is significantly more interesting than me. So there's two reasons, really. The first is entirely vanity. The first is that it is our 20th birthday as Pura Aventura. So I mentioned this to Kristine earlier, and I said, we're 20, and she looked at me and said, uh-huh. So thanks for that, Chris. So 20 years ago, Diego, who's here this evening, where are you, Diego? Hola. And Xavi and I set up a travel company specializing in Spain, Portugal, and Latin America. And so we're here tonight. Partly this is our birthday party. So, hello, Karen. I would like to just say a few words of thanks. First of all, to Chris, wherever he is, because he's taken most of the heavy lifting for this evening and has worked tirelessly. So thank you, Chris, wherever you are. I can't see you, but you're out there. I know you are. So thank you to Chris. Also, 20 years running a company, there are innumerable people to thank, but the main ones I would like to say thank you to are our many, many wonderful partners overseas throughout Latin America, Spain, and Portugal. Our almost invariably lovely clients who've seen us through the 20 years. You know who you are. I would very particularly like to say a word of thanks to Diego, who's shown such faith and trust and energy over the past 20 years. So thank you, Diego. I would also like to thank my father, who's in the audience. It's his birthday tomorrow, by the way, who in the early years particularly kept us going. So thank you. Couldn't have done it without you. And finally, I would like to say thank you to a colleague of mine who has been an absolute rock over many, many years. And without her, we would not be here. So, Sarah, thank you. You rock. So, we'll leave the self-indulgent bit behind. Thank you for your patience. Why are we here tonight? 20 years ago, we set up Pura Aventura, and we specialized in Patagonia and a little bit of northern Spain. Logic behind it, Diego's from a little bit of northern Spain, and we all met in Patagonia about 25 years ago. My map's out there from 95, 96. We met in Torres del Paine, which is in southern Chilean Patagonia, for those of you who don't know. And I remember going in there and thinking, I will never see anything as beautiful as this again. So I felt utterly privileged. I then decided, I got to the end of my hiking 6 weeks. I met Diego and Xavi and great. $100 in my pocket. I thought I can fly to Santiago or I can do something adventurous like hitchhike. And if you look at your map, you can probably approximately estimate the distance between Torres del Paine, that's very bottom, and Santiago, that is near the very top of this map, if not off the top. It's off the top of the map. Over 6 weeks, 7 weeks, I think it took me, hitchhiking through Argentina, back into Chile again, up the very recently built Carretera Austral, Southern Highway, passing this new, strange conservation project called Pumalin Park. I ended up in Santiago. By the time I got to Santiago, I had been shown so many beautiful things, but also so many acts of kindness by the incredible people who live through the communities of Patagonia. They took me in and they looked after me when I needed it and when I didn't need it, just because they wanted. So I left Chile with the kind of great love of the place and a sort of debt of gratitude in my heart. And that's really where Pura comes from. So it's a very simple idea of just sharing places that we love, we're passionate about. And it's our duty, as we share them, to protect them and to preserve them. That's how we make our holidays. That's what we believe. As I say, hitchhiking past this little project that was a few years old at that point in Pumalin, a far, far grander project than Pura Aventura was taking shape. There were Tompkins Conservation were quietly buying up land, or loudly buying up land, whichever way you look at it, and creating national parks. And so our journeys, in a sense, have been parallel. At the beating heart is a desire to protect, to preserve, and to benefit the place that is Patagonia, the beautiful place that is Patagonia. So that's why we're here tonight. I could not be more excited or proud or grateful that Kristine Tompkins has come here to be with us tonight to launch this extraordinary project, of which you'll find out much more in a moment. I'd like to start the evening with a short video of me singing, of the route of the parks. Give you a sense of the grandeur of the place. It's a couple of minutes long, but it'll give you a great oversight, I believe. If we could go to video.
Route of Parks of Chile and Patagonia. 17 national parks. More than 1,700 miles of scenic beauty. Shelter for species in danger of extinction. And home to more than 60 communities, rich in culture and tradition. The route of parks of Chile and Patagonia spans a third of Chile, integrating 3 regions from Puerto Montt to Cape Horn, the Lake District, Aysén, and Magallanes. Uniting the Carretera Austral, the Patagonian channels, and the route to the end of the world. Protecting more than 28.4 million acres of national parklands. The route of parks of Chile and Patagonia represents an opportunity for local economic development based on tourism as a consequence of conservation. The most beautiful scenic route in the world already exists, and it is in Chile. Travel it, discover it, protect it. Of Parks of Patagonia, protected heritage of all Chileans.
And if I may welcome onto the stage, we've got, well, Kristine Tompkins, the main event. And she'll be in conservation with Joe Crowley from the BBC, off of the telly.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Tom. Thank you to Pura Aventura. Great voiceover on that film, Tom. I'd never have known that was you. That's great. You've been working on that. Well, look, thanks for joining us this evening, and what a thrill it is to be here with Kristine.
You can call me
Chris. I was going to start off formal, and then we'd sort of work down to Chris. To quote Chris, I think she wrote that one day earlier this year, she woke up one morning and gave away 1 million acres. It's a historic act, the largest private donation to the nation of Chile, and it's been part of a broader agreement with the Chilean government to create and expand national parks. Now, it's such that, as you've just seen from that film, you've seen from the leaflets in front of you, Chile and Patagonia now has a network of 17 national parks known as the Route of Parks. And crucially this year, Tompkins Conservation, of which Chris is the president and co-founder, along with their other conservation partners and the government, created a special fund to protect and enhance the legacy of the wildness of everything they've created and celebrating biodiversity across these protected areas. So we're going to talk about that. You know, these huge events were the culmination of over 25 years work. And actually, I hesitate to use the word culmination because it's got a finality to it. I suspect they are the ongoing milestones in an incredible legacy of work, which is all about pulling back the impact of mankind, celebrating biodiversity, and giving nature and the natural world space and time to recover. So that's what we're going to be talking about here this evening. So please put your hands together one more time for Chris Tompkins.
Thank you.
And Chris,
Yes.
all epic stories, we kind of have to start at the beginning. So how does a CEO of Patagonia, you know, a very well-known company, end up as this pioneering giant of landscape rewilding? Like, did you feel a calling? Take us back to those sort of early days in the early 90s. How did this start?
Well, I didn't start it. My husband, Doug, did. So falling in love really can take you in any direction possible. But matched with that, my husband, Doug, had decided he wanted to get out of business and sold his part of the second company he created, which was Esprit. And I, at that point, had been the CEO, started it in '73, and by 1992, I was desperate. I'd never had another job, and I thought I could be sitting in the same bloody seat when I was 20, 30, 40, 50, maybe 60, maybe even 70, and I began to be desperate, and I knew I wanted to do something else, but I wasn't sure what. And then Doug and I ran into each other in a small town in southern Argentina, and that was that. And anyway, as all fabulous romance stories go, I retired from Patagonia, and we shifted our focus to what today is Pumalín National Park with 1 million acres of temperate rainforest.
Tell me about the draw that landscape had on you when you sort of met Doug down there. What did that area say to you?
Doug was the draw. I couldn't imagine living there. I mean,
Really?
It's 6,000 millimeters of rain a year. So someone who's coming from Central California, where it's always between 68 and 72 degrees and almost never rains. This was shocking. And in a roadless area, it's the only other roadless area between Alaska and the tip of South America, other than the Darien Gap in Panama. So it was noteworthy. You either had to come in by boat down a vicious fjord or fly in vicious weather. So it was pure love at the moment.
Wow.
And then as things do, rather organically, I really began to see what Doug saw, and we've started then by 1994 acquiring large tracts of land, and really by 1997, and some of this team is here from Argentina and Chile, we started what is our still largest project in northern Argentina.
Yeah.
So it spread out fairly quickly.
That first project, Pumalín,
Yes.
Why there? Why did Doug make a start there? Why did you start your conservation efforts there?
I think when he sold Esprit, he was looking around for a place to be outside of San Francisco, and he had gone up into British Columbia on the western coast of Canada, and really saw what was happening to the forests there. There would be beauty strips, but behind those beauty strips, there was clear cutting at a tremendous rate. And someone told him about the giant alerce trees in the southern coast of Chile, and he went down there, saw them, absolutely pristine, and he found a farm that cost what a garage would cost in San Francisco, and he just bought it at the toe of this fjord, which was our base for a long time. Hence, and I don't believe that he arrived in Chile with that intention, but the conversion, which was very much like Doug, he could see things very early on, and he presented with 200,000 acres and then another 300,000 acres, and then it just mushroomed, and then it became self-evident that we love national parks, so let's make everything we do national parks. And from that, we began to realize that national parks are really just a strategy to get to what we're really after, which is to try to throw the brakes on the extinction crisis, to the extent that we can have an impact on that, of course. And that's how we got involved in rewilding species in Chile and predominantly in Argentina.
And national park speaks to your heritage as sort of Californians, because that's
absolutely.
Such a big idea
For us, national parks in the United States you can't separate how you feel about the patrimony of the United States and not associate that with the national park system. Absolutely, it's inherent in how we think about ourselves.
So as you start buying up land, and this is a fairly aggressive strategy, isn't it? You are sort of acquiring at a rate of knots. What is the big threat as you see it? Is it primarily agriculture and the impact that agriculture is having on this landscape?
Well, every place we work has a different set of threats to it. In Pumalín, it was really logging, probably. The burning. The area of Pumalín, which you know so well, having suffered through it, is as I said, it's a rainforest. And so farming there, ranching there had to be at a small scale. It was just not a place, it should be a forest. And most of the people who tried to farm there just failed. Eventually, the forest would win and take the land back from you. But logging was a big issue, and it's part of it is skill, but a lot of it was timing. This was, if you put yourself in southern Patagonia or southern Chile 26 years ago, there were very few people down there doing much, and so you had conservation opportunities that were tremendous. And
absentee landlords, people you could buy land
most of the big tracts of land were bought from foreigners.
Right.
And never have we bought any land with people living on the property, so we haven't had those kinds of issues.
And when we talk about this 1 million acres, this really incredible donation, that was predominantly made up of Pumalín and what became Patagonia National Park.
That's right.
That's right.
And there were 4 others, but so much of our work is based on leveraging. We're a family foundation and we're proud of what we've done, but the fact is that we saw early on that to really go after large-scale conservation, we needed to leverage every dollar that we invested in conservation. So in this package of the Chilean parks that we finished at the front end of this year, and certainly the biggest leverage we've ever achieved We had 28,000 hectares in the Chilean archipelago in the south, and we asked the government for additional 10.5 million acres. And they ended up kicking in 11.3 million acres. Wow. So that was our all-time record in terms of leverage. But we're always, when we're looking at maps and studying things, we're immediately looking at what's next door and how do you maximize conservation in a finite world, financial world.
I'll come back to a bit more of that in a bit, actually, but let's go to the Patagonia National Park, because that wasn't logging, was it? That was ranching.
Overgrazing.
Overgrazing.
Yes.
So tell me the story of acquiring that land, because I don't know if you have pets, but you suddenly ended up with sort of thousands of animals on your hands, didn't you?
Yes. Doug discovered, and I say discovered between the two, our discovery of it was in 1991. He drove through what is the Valle Chacabuco Valley to go boating out into Argentina. And then he took me through this valley in 1993, and I didn't think anything was so special about it. At that same time, we had bought something on the Argentine coast, on the Atlantic side, and donated it and created the first coastal national park of Argentina. And then we went for a big estancia that we could never really close on. So I was really depressed over this. You never want something so badly as the moment you're told you can't have it. And that with land, that's me. And so that having fallen apart, we drove back through Valle Chacabuco. And he said, Bertie, this is the project. This is it. This is a once in a lifetime. Okay. Anyway, I thought it was too much. It was what I thought would be expensive. It was more complicated because he saw this as my project.
Oh, right.
Yes. That's why he was so sure of it. No problem. Anyway, the long and short of it is, it was a big fight to buy the front end of what became Patagonia National Park. There was a lot of hue and cry over Pumalín, and 10% of that carried over into the Patagonia National Park. So a lot of suspicion and just downright unhappiness about Chile's third largest sheep ranch becoming a park.
Is that what it was, the third largest?
Yes.
That's really significant.
The first purchase was 176,000 acres.
Right.
And we never bought land with the livestock on it, although Sophia's about to do that now again. But this was so contentious that we had no choice. So we bought 25,000 sheep at the time we closed on this deal. All of a sudden, we have, all these sheep, and they're worth $1 million. So all of a sudden, you need to be a sheep rancher because it's an asset, and da-da-da-da-da-da. So we were in the sheep ranching business in that valley for 4 years. And
wow.
I made a little business plan, a little square. Okay, if we do this, how do you maximize this? And that helped fund the front end of the transition of what became almost 800,000 acres of national park today.
Goodness me. And you can't just get rid of 25,000 sheep like that, can you? I mean, it doesn't
well,
happen.
you can, but you have to be really cautious. You don't want to have a negative impact on the meat and wool markets. Yeah. And we wanted to maximize the investment. So we figured out how to do that. And as I said, it really funded a lot of stuff on the front end. So I was happy about that.
So as you got rid of the sheep and you sort of got rid of that obligation to livestock, what was it this landscape needed? What was it missing? What state was it in? And what did you have to do to it?
We took down about 500 miles of fencing.
500 miles?
Mm-hmm. And most of that, 90% of that, was with volunteers. We had 13 years of a volunteer program. Wow. And everybody who came down thought, oh, I'm going to be in Patagonia. This is going to be a cakewalk. And they go out and work like dogs, big winds, rains, and then they leave 3 weeks later, and they've worked like hell. So that was a great program, and they fall in love. And some of them actually did fall in love.
So you kept those ones, like you stayed.
And really, 20% of the total number of acres is forest, and that's where the cattle were on this ranch. So you take the cattle out, this is where the Waymold deer are likely to be, which is another story talking about the reestablishment of healthy populations of Waymold. And then really just taking the sheep off and letting these grasslands slowly but surely find their feet again. I mean, some areas I don't think will ever come back.
Really?
In the more arid areas. I mean, we have no idea because there isn't a track record to know what's going to happen with these really, truly devastated grasslands over time. And especially as you get out into as you go east, the territory becomes more arid, and we don't really know what's going to happen to them. But now there are hundreds of thousands of acres that have a shot at it anyway, and some of it's coming back beautifully. So I think it's just going to be an uneven evolution of grasslands health.
How do you find that process? Because I imagine both you and Doug, you are doers. You sort of pursue these goals, and then you have to leave it to nature. You have to sort of step back, and you have to show a lot of patience. Is that quite hard? Do you sort of want to rush the process?
I don't think I'm well known for my patience.
Right.
On the other hand, we're talking about a scale that's so vast that going into it, that you can restore very specific areas perhaps. Maybe you're testing different methods for restoration and taking out exotic plants and things like that. But to imagine that you're going to bring back hundreds of thousands of acres of grasslands is really not too reasonable.
How did you know what to do? I mean, you're both going into this with business backgrounds, ultimately, aren't you? You've got a love of this landscape. Do you have scientific advice? I mean, talking about the early days, scientific advisors, or is it sort of gut feeling about what needs to happen? Because now we call it rewilding, but that term was only really being coined by you in the early 90s or mid 90s. So how did you, what guided you?
Well, I think you can't think about any of our work in terms of Doug and Chris, because from the beginning, we had team members who, they weren't necessarily specialists, but we're all in this together. So certainly, as the projects became better known, people were coming to visit an awful lot, and a lot of them were scientists, biologists, botanists, and so on, ichthyologists. So we learned a lot from them, and then, Sophia, who's sitting over there, she had tremendous experience coming into the team 20 years ago, and she's really the architect of a lot of what happened, most of what's happened in Argentina. So she and the gentleman who's in charge of rewilding for Argentina, they have a network of people who are extraordinary. And we always, I think, have been good about knowing what we don't know and surrounding ourselves with the best people possible. Without our teams, we wouldn't be sitting here tonight. So I think it's always, I caution people to think about this as Doug and Chris.
Were you afraid of making mistakes? Because there's sort of, human history is littered with well-meaning interventions where sort of people go in and try and fix something, be it an ecosystem or something else, and actually they can make things much worse. Did that ever occur to you, or you can't allow that to sort of worry you?
Well, I don't worry about that too much.
No.
I don't. Well, certainly we make plenty of mistakes, but by and large, if you look at the trajectory of our work as teams, we make mistakes every day, but by and large, I would say that our trajectory more or less shows that we have found our way through potholes. And, you know, when we started in Chile, we got off to a hell of a start. We were completely vilified when we were working on Pumalín. So,
what were people saying? What was the criticism?
What didn't they say? Oh, well, Pumalín goes from the Argentine border to the Pacific Ocean. So we were famously known as the couple who cut Chile in half.
It's quite a claim, isn't it?
Well, it went down from there. We were creating a new Jewish state, although we were raised as Anglicans. A new nuclear waste site for the United States, base camp for the Argentine military to come in and finish Chile off once and for all. You know, and looking at the time, it was frightening. There were a lot of death threats. We had military planes flying over where we were based. It was quite, our phones were tapped for 5 years. It was quite something. But I look back on it now, and it seems very reasonable to me that all that happened. If you put it in the context of 1992, 3, 4, 5, and foreigners come, they buy up huge tracts of land and do nothing with it. And of course, there was tremendous skepticism. And so I don't really worry about that anymore. And it really happened to us when we got started in northern Argentina as well. It's a wetlands area, and they accused us of selling water to the Chinese. But that doesn't really bother me.
Okay.
I think it's
So you didn't doubt yourself when this criticism was coming across?
Well, I didn't doubt ourselves, but I didn't.
At the point you're getting death threats, it's pretty unpleasant.
Yeah, it was unpleasant. And it didn't help Doug, put out what do you call it, a prize money for the leading to to whoever was killing sea lions out in front of at the toe of this fjord. So we had huge fights with the salmon industry. We had an 8-year fight over a dam, a series of dams in pristine Patagonia. So it wasn't just conservation that was putting us in the press and in the bullseye of most people. It really also was activism.
But that was very important. That was very much a part of what you wanted to do. You wanted to create this noise, didn't
Absolutely.
you? Yeah.
Yes. I mean, in hindsight, Doug was more clear about that at the time than I was. But yes, it was the thing that has changed Chilean society in a certain kind of way. I don't credit us with that, but things in Chile have really shifted around, and some of that came out of this era.
And without that, would you have got to the milestones you've had this year with these agreements with the state? I mean, it's all linked, isn't it, in terms of sort of keeping the dialogue going and building up to these big achievements?
Yeah, I think the former president of Chile, President Bachelet, had a real sense of not only her personal legacy, but the legacy for the country. And when we made this, what was then an outrageous proposal to create 5 new national parks and enlarge 3 others, millions of acres involved. Honestly, I still, to this day, am dumbfounded that it came to its full conclusion. And I think that she saw this as good for the south of Chile, which is the product of the Ruta de los Parques, I'd like to say. And so for her, it was the legacy of beauty in Chile. It's an economic driver for the extreme south. So she had her own reasons, and it was just one of those things. And then she left office, President Piñera came in, and he finished it off with his government.
And that's the political victory. How do you win over these communities that were so critical along the way? How do you sort of start to win hearts and minds and prove what you're doing isn't some sort of big conspiracy
I don't
theory?
think we have completely. I think if you went down the Carretera Austral or down into Magallanes, you would find people who really see this, as we hope they eventually will, as an anchor and a possibility for their futures and their kids not leaving the minute they need to get a job and so on and so forth. And there are other people who feel like, largely pointed at us, we have taken so much out of production. And I always say, I disagree with you. We have changed what it's producing. If you looked at the Patagonia National Park and consider the number of people who were employed during even the glory years of that estancia, is a very low number. And then you compare that to the number of jobs in the park, and then as tourism, with all its benefits and warts, those jobs begin to expand out into the communities. But this is not to say that everybody along the ruta is necessarily in favor of all of these parks and this idea.
And that's even today. So even though they don't necessarily doubt your credentials now in the way that you've donated
Oh,
back
no,
to the
nobody
state,
doubt. No,
but they
there's
still don't
none of
necessarily
that.
agree with losing the production in these areas, or they have different economic views to your own, perhaps.
I don't know that they, no, I don't think they have different economic views. I think these are always cultural shifts. And culture, by definition, never changes in some tectonic way. It's always a tipping point, a grain of sand, and that's just, culture is designed to be hard to change. That's why culture exists. There you want, not necessarily conformity, but you want community systems to originally work for the safety of everyone, for the reproduction of their numbers, whatever the original, the heart of culture should be hard to change. Mm. And this is the real problem with climate change today. And it may be fatal that, as Jared Diamond says, culture always trumps common sense. And it does. I mean, you're seeing it play out right now in terms of climate change and other issues we face. So anyway, it's not that I think that everyone along this route will engage in this or like it. But you wouldn't have that anyway. Doesn't matter where you are or what point you enter any sort of the intersection of any change. But what we do hope is that the flourishing of biodiversity that pumas and guanacos in this case, and the colo cats and all of these members of the non-human world, they have value of and by themselves. They have their own intrinsic value. But as we've seen in African models and different places around the world, there is a value to that is also community-driven. I don't like to ask more of tourism than it can handle. And I don't think any of us imagine that it's a silver bullet that will come in and somehow cure the ills that we see wherever it is in the world. But I do think that it adds to the possibilities, the flexibilities of communities. And then people can decide which way they go or which way their families go. My end desire and hope is that the communities along this route, or the communities in Argentina where we work, see these parks as theirs, that they have a sense of ownership and pride, the same way that we do for most of our parks in the United States. And that those parks give them, besides an economic future and a way to use their local skills for a greater audience and respect and attention, but that they also see jaguars. We're going to release our first 3 jaguars in January, and that's a very big deal. And it's a very big deal for everybody, the 10 communities around this giant 2 million acre wetland system.
This is Iberá in Argentina.
In Iberá.
Iberá.
So that's where you begin to see that in some way, certainly the Tompkins conservation steps out of the picture. We don't need to be in this picture. We won't be in this picture. We don't even want to be in this picture several years from now, because we'll step out. Sophia eventually will walk the length of South America, and those jaguars and those peccaries and giant anteaters will be there with these communities, and they don't need us. They have their own engine, their own self-determined future in a balance. And that's what we're going for. We don't care that we developed all this and we're stepping out. This is Chile's. This is for them. We help it get it going, give it people like you who are here tonight to think about this, to hear about this. But after that, we should and want to disappear.
And you have to have that ultimate trust that that community, those cultures, will keep it going in perpetuity.
Well, you have to hope that that's the case, because if you don't do that, you have no hope 100 to 200 years from now, in my opinion. Local communities are the first line of defense for the non-human world and land conservation. I'm sure of this. And even though national park administrations in the United States, wherever it is, suffer, they're underfunded, they get ignored, whatever it is, still in all, they need to exist, and the communities around them need to have this symbiotic relationship. Everybody benefits.
And this comes back to a great theme of yours, which is responsibility. And I think I remember you saying, look, I used to, Patagonia, Doug was doing North Face, you loved these landscapes, but it was time to act and take responsibility for them, not just go and visit and go home again. And I suppose you're asking the same of those communities, aren't you? That everyone steps forward and takes responsibilities.
I wouldn't put it that we're asking it of them.
Or giving them the opportunity to, then.
It's that you have to be smart enough or aware to just hold up a mirror. What's there? Who's there in those communities? They have unbelievable knowledge about the place. They have unbelievable skills. They have stories until the horses come home. I mean, it's there. It's how do you appreciate those things again as you are beginning to appreciate again the very thing you bought and are protecting, that it's not very different. It's bringing the roots of human communities and the non-human world back into a status that they matter, that long-term, this is where, if people talk about hope, I'm not big on hope, but if I had to put my money, which we do, on something, I will say it is the strength and the regeneration of local communities and ecosystems. And they should go together, or one or the other will not flourish. That's what I think.
So it can never be about the abandonment and completely wildness of places. People have to be there. People have to own communities. And you've also, as you touched on before, got to find that right balance of tourism. Because again, it's got to be managed quite carefully, hasn't it? I mean, that's...
Well, we don't manage it, first of all. We're just seeds. But one would hope that the pretty ubiquitous loving something to death, we can't control that. We can only instill the idea that culture, social frameworks, good, healthy parks to visit, that they have value such that the communities that are inviting the industry in have their own means to design their destiny in terms of who they are 50 years out, in terms of tourism. You know, we're not in the tourism business, but well, actually we are. But it's not, it's a strategy. And hopefully a contribution to the people who live where we work. But it's, as I said a few minutes ago, if we do our work right, when we're gone, you know, the hopes that you have contributed toward can be realized, and they will all have their own style and their own means of evolution and what they become. Those are all things that have to be decided at a local level. And I put my money on just what I said: healthy ecosystems, flourishing wildlife, the ability to go out and see all sorts of wildlife in ways that you couldn't have imagined in Patagonia before. There's a real intrinsic value to that, and there's an economic value to that for those who are in the area. So hopefully we're right about this.
Yeah, I'm sure. Tell us a bit about this fund that you established. We don't need to go into huge detail, but why is it so significant? Why is this a good shot at sort of preserving this legacy? What does it do?
Well, the fund is not ours, and it's not finalized. President Piñera has signed a protocol to work toward it. But it's a fund of like-minded conservationists, and that some are institutions, some are individuals, who effectively were building a sinking fund. It is not an endowment, but it's a sinking fund that is in partnership with the Chilean government, yet to be signed, that asks of the fund, the funds, but also asks the country to put up commitments toward the national parks within the rutas, in terms of administration, in terms of park funding, and so on and so forth. So if you do it right, and there are 6 other examples of this in the world, there's Bhutan just was created, Colombia, the first one was Costa Rica, probably 15 years ago. But if you do it right, then as the fund begins to sink 15, 20 years out, the government has had the time and the skills to come up and meet it. So you're heavy on the front end, and it tapers. It tapers to it's a sinking fund. Yeah. So that's it. And I haven't seen any signs yet that that's not a possibility. Okay.
This is what you're holding out for. This is the sort of great hope, sort of politically, the next big
well,
achievement.
I think that, I mean, there's intention on both sides, definitely. But there's still a road to walk, so I never count on anything until it's done.
I'm aware the time's getting on, and I want to leave a bit of time for questions, so we'll come to that very shortly. Away from the politics and funds and all that kind of stuff, what do you find most exciting? Is it the big reintroduction projects? Is it the Jaguars about to go into Argentina? What most excites you at the moment?
Oh, God. I don't know. Really, all of it. That's a terrible answer. But I do have to say that I love big spaces. I love big territories. So I'm really in the right business.
Yeah.
And rewilding is it's a more emotional side of our work, because every species takes so much work and handling. Every individual comes to you with its own particularities, with its own problems. You know, one has been hit by a car. The teams who are working on rewilding, both in northern Argentina, now really expanding in southern Argentina, and over in Chile, in Patagonia, these guys are working in the field every day with often individuals checking on them, their collars, they're tracking them. So I would say that rewilding is surely the most emotional side of what we do. And when there are successes, it's extraordinary. I mean, it's time to break out the champagne, but when when an individual dies or something goes terribly wrong, then of course it hits everybody with great difficulty. But walking the Patagonia grasslands, there's nothing like it. You know, there are very few places in the world where grasslands are being regenerated in this way. And forests, or there's a project in southern Argentina on the coastline now, which is a real point of pride for us, because it's land but also going for the coastal waters. We're really trying to link that up in our future projects. And Sophia has decided we're going to rewild around the islands with algae. Well, that's a whole new chapter and a whole new set of difficulties or challenges. How do you do that? How do you start wrapping your head around the expansion of all these projects? And then you realize there's no limit to this. I mean, we're going to stay in the Southern Cone and concentrate there, but even within that series of ecosystems, God, it's endless.
Yeah. So these are the next great challenges. So
yeah,
it's moving on to marine parks as well then as part of your
yes.
conservation effort, which I find...
We already have 2 whoppers.
Two what?
Well, I just called them a whopper, but that's probably, that's not a scientific term.
Yeah. How many acres is a whopper?
What is the total size of the 2? One of the authors of these 2 whoppers is sitting in the front row here. 100,000 square kilometers.
Fair enough.
Those were our first 2 marine no-take zones, first in the country. So these aren't marine protected areas. These are no-take zone, nothing.
No commercial fishing at all?
First ones. That's what we decided we would go for, the most difficult.
Wow.
And it was difficult.
and that's being obeyed, and you can track that, and that works, because it's very hard to keep an eye on that many square kilometers.
Well, no. In the marine conservation world, you're not charged with monitoring it. That is a whole system that countries now are struggling with and figuring out. You know, there are a lot of technological tools now to track the fishing industry and all sorts of things. Who's fishing where? But there's a lot of pirating, obviously, in commercial fishing. So yeah, we have big plans for connecting the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans down where we are, and relating that to the Antarctic Peninsula that comes up from the south. And those waters that come down along the Chilean coast up the other side of Argentina is what we're focused on in terms of the marine side and terrestrial.
Yeah, it should surprise no one that those are ambitious landscape projects still on the sea as they have been on the land. We have some time for a few questions. So we've got a couple of roving microphones. If we could get one down here to begin with, and maybe another one over there if we can. Thank you. Just keep your hand up till the mic comes to you. Thanks.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for that.
Hello again.
As one of the pioneers of rewilding, I wanted to get your take on what is potentially one of the most controversial aspects of rewilding, and the one that's a lot of tension around, and that's the use of analog species to put function back in ecosystems where the original species might be gone forever. And that tension between rewilding being something where you let ecosystems flourish and start to work on their own, and the amount of intervention we might have to do, including putting species there that were never there.
I actually am going to have Sophia answer this, sorry. But I think it's worth it because it's a big issue in rewilding.
So we're talking about sort of proxy species here. So whatever it is that would have done that role in the ecosystem is extinct.
Sophia Henonen is the head of all of Argentina. And she hates it when I say this, but she's one of the great conservation strategists in the universe. I've expanded it to the universe.
Well, I am a bit shy, so I'm not there in the...
She hates it when I say that.
About rewilding, what we know is, we started to learn about the rules of nature and how ecosystems regulate themselves. And knowing that, what we try to do is to bring back the key roles of ecosystems, because that is the way we can bring back health to them. And basically, being in South America, we have a huge extinction, like 15,000 years ago, and most of the megafauna is not there. So we deal with the ones we have in the last 1,000 years, and we try to do what we can with the species we have. And that's a lot, I have to say, because bringing back jaguars and top predators and trying to restore the migration of the camelids and how they move through the long Patagonia up to the meseta and down to the valleys is really a challenge. But that is the meaning of bringing back the soil and bringing back the grasslands and trying to bring back all the niche where different species evolve. So our idea of rewilding is basically try to, that evolution can continue and basically have a huge biodiversity and a functional ecosystem. That is our challenge.
Sophia, I think there was a specific...
Yes, and the one that bring species to when you don't have the top predators, what you can do. We know that here in Europe, that's some of the things they are trying to bring back with horses and probably dogs and instead of wolf and that kind of things. Well, it's a lot of trying and seeing how is best, but the whole species that are around that ecosystem. No, we don't have that kind of challenges in South America, but it's one of the main questions about rewilding, and we didn't deal with that moral things in South America. But we have a lot of other things to do because rewilding is, nobody is thinking about rewilding ecosystems in South America. We are the first one, so we have a lot of challenges to get the politicians to authorize moving animals from one country to the other, bringing back top predators in places where they're gone. So we're dealing with really difficult questions as well. No? And you have to go and see. It's adaptive.
Thank you, Sophia. Just to understand that, so the controversy there is you're trying to wind the clock back to a certain point to rewild to that but you don't have the species to do it, and that's what's causing the problems.
Yeah, there's a difference between rewilding and restoration ecology. Restoration ecology has fidelity to species, rewilding has fidelity to function. So you might use a completely different species to get the function.
Right.
Yeah, we're fortunate that we don't have to confront that.
Okay. Yes, we had another question.
Yes.
Kristine, thank you very much for this conversation. I'm very interested in knowing by yourself, as one of the leaders, conservation, or more important, conservation agents back in Chile, which would be, from your perspective, the biggest challenge to conserve, like la ruta de los parques en la Patagonia in particular, but also like natural areas and protected areas like across the country and also like in Argentina?
Biggest challenges, well, funding, for one thing, if it's outright acquisitions. Probably establishing this connection between local communities and protected areas, because that takes years. And of course, everyone feels like we don't have years, but it really is place-specific. The closer you get to Santiago, the more difficult it becomes. The farther north you get into the deserts, we've never had the notion to work up there. But to answer that, we would have to sit down with a map of Chile and ownership, what's federal, what's private, and then I could answer that, I think, with some skill. You just have to be in it for the long haul. It's very hard to take on something like this, and we try to move as fast as anybody does. But it's a commitment of long term. It's working with governments, and oftentimes, as we have with President Bachelet to President Piñera. So you have to it's like juggling. You have to love to juggle and work on a lot of fronts at once. So they are all challenges in their way, and the intensity of each ball varies. Sometimes it's political and you have it in this hand, and sometimes it's something else. So tough, it's hard to say.
We've got another couple down here and there, if we can get microphones on either side. While we're getting microphones there, I know you were at you were in New York yesterday. You were at the Climate Summit.
Yes.
How sort of inspired and invigorated are you by the so-called Greta effect? Because so many of the things you've been talking about for so many years are now coming through the mouths of the younger generation.
I'm completely inspired by her. Not just her, but what happened last Friday here in London and all over the place. For me, this generation has blossomed. I came out of the 60s from the peace movement, feminist movement, civil rights movement. And then it feels like, this is probably not quite fair, that everybody went quiet. And all of a sudden, and not just Greta, but there are millions of teenagers and young 20s who are absolutely willing to go the distance to fight for their futures. And what better voice than somebody, as they look at me and say, oh, Bertie, you're going to die of old age. I'm going to die of climate change. And they're right, and they know it. And what better motivation, but also the singular power of looking at a child. We were saying this afternoon, good luck putting police or military people in the face of thousands of children. It is brilliant, it is timely, and this 16-year-old, I listened to the speech she gave on Monday to the UN, and I can't remember feeling this way for 30 years, 25 years. Not once, not like this. So there's something to that, and we have to join in as oldsters, or not that you guys are old, but some of us are old. And by God, we have to step in onto the street and go with them. Because everything else that happened in New York could plunge you into such despair. I happened to be at an event where I spoke last night, and at a cocktail party before the event actually unfolded, there were heads of state, ministers, all sorts of very responsible leadership. And I listened to them talking about her speech on Monday. And I just thought, sovereign leadership, which is a lot of what has to happen, is really out of time, and it's not there. It's just not. Or it is, but I'll only go so far if you do, and if you don't, then I'm going to roll back. Trump is suing the state of California for having to increase the regulation over their emissions. Now California has to sue the federal government. This is insane. This is a time that if we have any moral compass, this is the time, especially for us who have seen the benefits and the efficacy of fighting. And this is what Greta represents, and I'm her girl. I will be there with her, and all the other kids, and I'll be the oldest one there.
But who's got the microphone over here? Yes, sir.
I just wanted to ask, congratulations, as everybody else. How do you mark the boundaries of the national parks and the reserves? And is there a danger of poachers and illegal loggers, illegal miners coming in? And do you therefore have to employ a lot of guards and warders?
Okay. First of all, we make the national parks as large as possible. So in this sense, we're quite greedy. But the first thing we always do when we go into an area is map it. And generally speaking, these areas are not well mapped. And in the case of the biggest project we have in Argentina, it was completely an unknown territory, even to the province who has jurisdiction over it. So you map it. You understand the ecology of the area. What are the areas that you really have to have to make that ecosystem whole again? So you're looking at it from that perspective. As I said, we're looking at leverage all the time. So maybe we can buy 300,000 acres, but what is just outside of that? And then you put the stakes in. I mean, I'm joking. Most of these parks, they're not fenced. It's not Africa, where everything will be fenced in Africa eventually. These are still territories where there's a low human population density, and you can still imagine protected areas with their boundaries and their national park status, which is a big deal. When we donate big tracts of anything to the government, that goes with a giant legal document, and one of the things in it is called a modal, and it says, if this donation is used for anything outside of the original intent and spirit of the gift, those territories revert to Tompkins conservation. That's not a fight you'd want to get into, but you have the legal foundation to do so. And beyond that, that's how they take shape.
We are going to have to go upstairs for a drink, I think. Now they've changed the clock in front of me, so it's like a flashing countdown, which I think means the stage is about to explode. If there was a really brief question on this side, we would take it very quickly, because I did promise on this side. I don't know who's got the microphone.
There's one.
I can't see who's got the microphone there. Yes, go on, really quickly, and a quick answer, and then
Yeah.
we'll get off.
I hope it's going to be a quick one. Hi. I'm interested, how are you expecting to fund the national parks, and how are you expecting to get money flowing? Because I imagine that's a proper
They're all
investment.
funded by their representative national governments. For better or for worse, we are not funding the parks once they're donated.
Thank you.
A lot of that has to do with private concessions that take over the tourism inside and so on, but we don't continue to fund them.
Great. Thank you for the quick question, quick answer. That's fantastic. I know that Thomas and everyone at Pura would love your company upstairs for a drink. Follow the staircase. Tom, would you like to give any more details?
Well, am I on mic? Well, first of all, obviously, I would like to say thank you very much indeed, Joe, for that, but specifically to Chris, not just for being here tonight, and she was at the UN General Assembly last night, weren't you? So slightly off a plane overnight, giving an award to the Chilean president. So that's how she rolls. Thank you for being here, but thank you and Team Tompkins and all of the surrounding people and teams for this, because it gives us hope, and that's wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you.
As Chilean ambassador, I want to propose a toast tonight for Chris McDivitt Tompkins and her late husband Douglas. But before doing so, let me briefly pay homage to them. Their incredibly generous contributions to Chile have made my life as Chilean ambassador easy, because Chris and Douglas have given us something to be really proud of, something I as ambassador can celebrate: this incredible route of the parks, and above all, the parks themselves. Of course, the natural landscapes they have given us were always there, but we hardly saw them, let alone valued them, until Chris and Douglas came along to make us focus on them, love them, and then save them for Chile and for mankind. To save the most amazing temperate rainforest in the world, and with it, huge areas of craggy mountains, valleys, and volcanoes, fjords, lakes, glaciers that make it a place of stunning beauty. A beauty that, believe me, would, without Chris and Douglas, have been gradually spoilt. It is now preserved for posterity. And thanks to the great work of Pura Aventura, it can be visited by all of you, whether you opt for a 1,700-mile trek or prefer to do it in an SUV. Chris and Douglas not only saved our natural habitat and its flora and fauna, they reformed our mindset. They made us environmentally conscious. They changed how we feel about ourselves. We still have a long way to go, I have to say. I don't want to sound complacent, but we're on the right track. It's no accident that we are holding COP25 in Chile this year, where some 25,000 people will come to Santiago for a climate change summit. So I feel like evoking Churchill's line about the RAF. Never was so much owed by so many to so few. With the few being, in this case, just two people. So a deeply grateful toast, please, to the wonderful Chris and Douglas.
Oh my goodness.